The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up to the north side of my ranch just beyond the cedar tree line. My dog, Buck, perked up in the passenger seat, ears twitching as faint music drifted across the pasture. That was my first clue. The second was the sight of a floating bounce pad bobbing in the middle of my lake. I slammed the truck into park and stepped out, heart already pounding. It wasn't just noise pollution, it was a full-blown party on my private property. Kayaks skimmed across the water. A dozen lawn chairs dotted the shoreline. Teenagers cannonballed from my dock while tiki torches flickered along the edge like some resort setup. I didn't need to guess who was behind this. Only one person in our community had the entitlement and goal to throw a bash on land that wasn't theirs and act like it was civic duty. Karen Mitchell, HOA President, neighborhood tyrant, the kind of woman who weaponized bylaws like grenades and treated every quiet homeowner like a peasant in her kingdom. Sure enough, I found her lounging under a pop-up canopy by the lake's edge, sipping from a sparkling wineglass and chatting with a caterer like she owned the horizon. She looked up and flashed her signature grin, tight-lipped and dismissive. "Oh good, you made it, Karen," I said, voice low and sharp. "Why are there 30 people on my land?" She didn't miss a beat. "Relax, Logan. It's for Jake. He just turned 25. I told him he could use the lake for his birthday. You told him he could use my lake." Karen stood up and brushed imaginary dust from her sundress. "Technically, it's shared space. The HOA map I have shows ambiguous lines around the lake. You never filed a complaint when we used it for the July 4th barbecue last year, so I assumed I'd stepped closer." "You assumed wrong. That lake's been on my family's deed since 1938. It's spring-fed, fenced, and recorded in Travis County records as private. I allowed that barbecue out of goodwill, not surrender." She crossed her arms. "Well, maybe it's time you start thinking about the community. This property's been underutilized for years. Jake's thinking of launching a guided kayak business. This could benefit everyone." It hit me like a slap. She hadn't just thrown a party, she'd gifted the lake to her son like it was hers. To give a legacy handed down through 5 generations, reduced to a birthday surprise for a man-child with a business plan and no capital. I didn't yell, I didn't curse. I just pulled out my phone and dialed the sheriff. Karen's smug expression faltered for the first time that afternoon. "You're calling the cops? That's ridiculous. You trespassed," I said flatly. "You brought guests, set up commercial-grade gear, and used a body of water that doesn't belong to the HOA if you think I won't document every part of this." She snatched the wine glass off the table. "Fine, we're leaving. No need to be so dramatic." But drama, it seemed, followed Karen like a perfume trail. Within an hour, the party cleared out, and the lakefront fell quiet again. The only thing left behind was a cooler, a shredded streamer tangled in my dock railing, and the bitter taste of violation. I thought that would be the end of it. WASN single quotes 2 days later. A marked patrol SUV rolled up my driveway. Officers stepped with a clipboard. "Calm but cautious, Mr. Holt," one of them asked. "We received a complaint from the HOA regarding unauthorized fencing around a shared lake amenity. They say you're blocking access to community water." I blinked. "Community water? That's my lake." The officer frowned, flipping through papers. "They say otherwise." I handed them my property deed. Then I showed them aerial maps, GPS coordinates, and surveyor records. 10 minutes later, they left with apologies. But Karen wasn't finished. She'd planted a seed, one she intended to grow into a war. And that's when I remembered something she clearly forgot. She might have worn the crown, but I held the purse 2 years ago. When the HOA was flat broke, Karen had begged me to fix the books. I quietly stabilized the budget and never asked for a spotlight. But now she'd trespassed. Now she'd lied to law enforcement. Now she'd made it personal, and I was ready to remind her just how much power a silent treasurer could wield. 3 years ago, the HOA was on the verge of collapse. Karen had come to me hat in hand, though of course, she still wore her signature silk scarf and pearls, as if desperation were just another fashion statement. The association was hemorrhaging cash after a string of bad contracts and unpaid vendors. Lawn services had walked off the job. The pool had to close for repairs they couldn't afford. Even the lights at the gated entrance flickered like a warning sign. "Logan, you run a successful ranch operation," she'd said back then. "You know finances. The board needs someone to quietly steer the ship." I'd agreed, under one condition: full financial access and no interference. Karen had smiled wide and waved me through. "Of course, we trust you." And she forgot about me until I started freezing her spending. What Karen didn't know was that over the past 2 years, I'd built a meticulous forensic profile of every transaction, every suspicious payment, every creative label slapped onto line items, meant for the community. Wellness consulting turned out to be her personal therapist. Event catering covered her niece's baby shower. HOA funds had become her private slush pool. I never said a word. I just kept the files, updating my records with each swipe of her HOA credit card. After the lake debacle and the sham police report, I knew it was time to use those records. I walked into the next HOA board meeting and, for the first time in nearly a year, took my seat at the table. Karen froze mid-sentence, stuttering through her agenda like she'd seen a ghost. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, voice sharp. "I figured it was time I showed up." "I noticed a lot of spending lately," I replied, placing the folder on the table with a satisfying thump. "I thought the board might appreciate some transparency." Her eyes narrowed. "You're overstepping your role." "No," I said calmly. "I'm fulfilling it." I clicked my laptop open and cast the screen onto the wall projector. Up came the spreadsheet, color-coded, time-stamped, cross-referenced. Then came the receipts. And finally, the policy violations marked in red. The room went silent. I began calmly reading through the worst offenses. $2,700 to a luxury spa in Austin, $1,200 to a high-end wine subscription, $5,000 paid to a consultant who, according to my background check, didn't even exist. A whisper from the back row. "Wait, that's our dues money." Karen jumped to her feet. "This is a vendetta. He's manipulating the books." "Then feel free to bring in an independent auditor," I replied. "I already contacted one. They'll be here next week." The room shifted. Several heads nodded. Even the board members Karen had installed sycophants who once parroted her every word looked shaken. Then I dropped the hammer. In light of recent misuse of funds and ongoing harassment, including a false police report filed against me, recommending a temporary freeze on all discretionary HOA spending pending a full financial review, I also moved for a vote of no confidence against Karen Mitchell as board president. Karen's face turned to stone. "You can't do that." "I just did. And unless you want me to take this to the county attorney's office and escalate this as misappropriation of community funds, I suggest you let the board vote." It passed 5-2. Karen stormed out of the room. For a moment, no one said a word. Then someone in the back clapped. Others followed. The tide had turned, but I knew better than to think she'd go quietly. Karen had ruled this neighborhood like a queen for too long. She wouldn't give up her throne without a fight. Sure enough, within 48 hours, I received 3 violation notices in the mail: improper outdoor lighting, unapproved barn paint color, and non-mailbox height. Every one of them absurd. Every one of them signed personally by Karen Mitchell. She hadn't lost not in her mind. She was regrouping, digging in, but so was I. She'd tried to use police, paperwork, and power to claim what wasn't hers. She thought the rules didn't apply to her. She was about to find out what real accountability looked like. By the end of the week, my mailbox looked like it had been personally targeted by a petty dictator with a stack of citations and a vendetta. Violation #1. My ranch sign didn't match the neighborhood's aesthetic. Violation number 2. The barn's color tone clashed with approved historical neutrals. Violation number 3. My windmill, installed 50 years before the HOA even existed, was now causing visual disruption. Each envelope bore the same smug signature: Karen Mitchell, HOA President. She was no longer hiding her spite behind rules. She was weaponizing them. But here's the thing about people like Karen: they always overplay their hand. In her scramble to reassert control, she forgot the one thing: I never stopped watching the budget. That weekend, I requested access to the HOA's most recent contractor invoices, something I was fully entitled to as the treasurer. The documents arrived late and redacted, a childish attempt to slow me down. But I didn't need the paperwork to know what she was doing. Karen had hired her brother-in-law, a compliance inspector, to issue bogus citations and rake in fees. What she didn't expect was for me to escalate. I gathered every violation, noticed cross-reference dates, and attached documentation disproving each claim. Then I sent everything: photos, statements, HOA bylaws, and Karen's own emails to the County Code Enforcement Office and the State HOA Oversight Division. But I wasn't done at the next board meeting. I entered with a hard case full of printed evidence and a laptop wired into the projector. The moment Karen saw me, she went rigid. "I didn't approve you speaking," she snapped. "I'm not here to speak," I said, flipping open the laptop. "I'm here to report fraud." The room fell silent. One by one, I displayed the fabricated violations alongside matching evidence: my property survey maps, dated photographs showing compliance, and even a signed approval letter from 3 years prior for the barn, color by Karen herself. Then came the final slide: a breakdown of the compliance consultant's payments. For invoices, all identical amounts, all issued by LKM's fake company registered under Karen's sister's address in Round Rock. A neighbor in the back stood up. "You mean she's fining us and paying her family with our dues?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The next 30 minutes erupted into fury. Homeowners demanded answers. Board members who had once nodded along with Karen now fumbled too, distanced themselves. Karen shouted over the chaos, calling it all a personal smear campaign. That's when the state auditor, seated quietly in the back corner, stood and held up her badge. Karen turned white. The board voted immediately to suspend Karen from her duties, pending investigation. The motion passed unanimously. The room was still buzzing when I stepped outside. The air smelled like sweetgrass and wood smoke, peaceful again. But peace was temporary. 2 days later, a patrol car rolled up my drive again, only this time it wasn't the local deputy. It was the county inspector, clipboard in hand. He glanced around, then grinned. "Logan Holt. Yeah, just wanted to thank you. We've been trying to pin something like this down for months. HOA corruption's slippery without documentation." He flipped open his notepad. "We'll be opening a full audit into Karen Mitchell's term. Might take a few weeks, but when we're done, it won't be pretty." "Good," I said. "Let me know if you need more." As he drove away, I looked out over my land wide open at mine. Karen had come after me with fake fines, false claims, and a smug belief in her untouchable status. Now she was suspended, under state investigation, and the community she once ruled like a queen. They were starting to see her for what she truly was, a fraud. But the real revenge wasn't punishment, it was what came next, because when you control the books, you control the future, and I was just getting started. With Karen suspended and the audit underway, the community buzzed with equal parts outrage and relief. The fear that once gripped our HOA meetings of whispered threats and retaliatory fines had vanished. In its place, something rare bloomed, trust. But I wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted restoration. For too long, Karen had treated the HOA budget like her personal playground. So, I pulled together a full financial proposal to fix what she broke, one that wouldn't just patch potholes or repaint fences. I wanted a legacy built on integrity, not intimidation. At the next open board meeting, I presented my plan to the homeowners. Over the last 18 months, I began. We've recovered nearly $42,000 in misappropriated or mismanaged funds. Rather than return it to a general fund that could be abused again, I'm proposing we use it to build something for all of us. The room leaned in. "Not on my land," I clarified, "but just across from the lake on HOA-owned green space. A shaded overlook, benches, walking trails, native gardens, real community use. Accessible, maintained, transparent." Applause erupted. Even the old-timers who once grumbled about every HOA fee stood and clapped. The board approved the project. Within days, within a month, the lakefront overlook took shape. Volunteers came with shovels, teenagers painted trail markers, and local veterans offered to build the pergola. A new kind of pride took root in the neighborhood, one not rooted in exclusivity or control, but collaboration. And Karen, she didn't show her face again until the final audit was released. The report hit mailboxes like thunder. Misused funds totaling over $87,000. Nepotism in vendor selection. Willful falsification of HOA records. The Oversight Board formally banned Karen Mitchell from holding any HOA office in the state for a minimum of 10 years. Civil litigation was underway to recover funds. Her house went up for sale within a week. I saw her once more briefly watching from her car as neighbors gathered around the new overlook. Jake's kayak business never launched. He'd moved out months earlier, leaving behind an empty dock float someone eventually recycled into garden seating. Justice hadn't come with sirens or spectacle. It came with quiet consequence and a budget ledger. I installed a new sign near the trailhead, hand-carved, weather-treated, and simple. Community overlook donated by the residents, funded by the truth. The next day someone left a note, pinned to my fence post. "Greater than you did more with a spreadsheet than 100 people did with complaints. Thank you, MT." I never found out who MT was, but it told me all I needed to know. Still, one last loose thread remained the lake, though I'd reinforced the fencing, POSTD clear signage, and filed formal property rights documentation. With the county, I knew someone would test the waters eventually. That test came one sunny afternoon when a real estate agent showed up with a couple eyeing Karen's old house. I watched from the ridge as the agent led them down the path toward my lake, gesturing wildly like a magician revealing a trick. They leaned over the fence and snapped pictures. I snapped one, two with a trail cam set up to document every intrusion. Later that night, I sent the agent a certified invoice, unauthorized commercial use of private property, $5,000, accompanied by photographic evidence, legal citations, and a very polite letter from my attorney. It was paid within 72 hours after that. No one questioned the boundary again. The lake remained mine, but so did something more valuable, a community that had seen what real leadership looked like, not loud or flashy, but consistent, principled, and fair. Some neighbors started calling me the quiet mayor. Others joked about me running for office, but I didn't need a title. I had my land, I had my peace, and I had the budget. In the end, it wasn't Karen's schemes or her son's entitled dreams that defined this story. It was a simple truth she never understood. Power doesn't come from position. It comes from accountability. And when you control the books, you control the ending.